Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, now we can see. Our reading today is a bit harsh, but it addresses what is important to God according to the words of the prophet Isaiah. It isn't worship. It isn't prayer. It isn't more meetings. Rather, it gets better. Rather, it all begins and ends and begins again with justice. Hear these words from the prophet Isaiah, chapter 1, verses 16 and 17. Quit your worship charades. I can't stand your trivial religious games. Monthly conferences, weekly Sabbaths, special meetings. I can't stand one more. Meetings for this, meetings for that. I hate them. You've worn me out. I'm sick of your religion, while you go right on sinning. When you put on your next prayer performance, I'll be looking the other way. No matter how long or loud or often you pray, I'm not listening. And do you know why? Because you've been tearing people to pieces and your hands are bloody. Go home and wash up. Sweep your lives clean of your evil doings so I don't have to look at them any longer. Say no to wrong, learn to do good, work for justice, help the down and out, stand up for the homeless, go to bat for the defenseless. Here ends our reading from the prophet Isaiah. Now let's talk about what justice really looks like.
That was from the Message translation, by the way, if you're wondering. I blame Carl for that one. He's a Presbyterian. It comes from the Presbyterian. So I always blame the Presbyterians, all else fails. So I'd like to invite the head of our Social Action Committee, Reverend Dr. Carl von Meigen, up to introduce our wonderful guests.
Do I dare say the social justice team is meeting? This Tuesday. But we don't have meetings, we have serious conversations and joy in the midst of it all. Indeed, on behalf of the social justice team, it is my honor and privilege to introduce you our speakers for this morning. Judith Scully has been a law professor since 1996. She joined the Stetson University College of Law in 2009 as a tenured full professor. From August 2011 until May 2017, she served as the William Reese Smith Distinguished Professor of Law for the purpose of developing public service, pro bono, and professionalism programs for Stetson Law students. She is the founder and co-director of Stetson Law School's Social Justice Advocacy Concentration Program and the Alliance for Advocacy and Philanthropy. She currently co-chairs the St. Petersburg Higher Education for Racial Equity, acronym SPHERE, this consortium, and was the co-founder and co-chair of the Florida Law School's Consortium on Racial Justice from 2020 to 2022. Credentials are full. She is a passionate advocate of racial justice, women's rights, and criminal legal reform. Also with us this morning is Jessica King. She attended the Christopher Newport University in Newport News, Virginia, where she studied sociology and minored in history and leadership studies. She is a second-year student at Stetson University School of Law and is in the Social Justice Advocacy Concentration Program. She is a Racial Justice Fellow with the St. Petersburg Higher Education for Racial Equity, or SPHERE as we now know it. Their consortium. She says she's currently interning with the Disability Rights Florida organization and would like to work with a nonprofit legal advocacy organization after graduating from law school. Judith is going to bookmark Jessica's comments for us, and then I will invite you as well after worship, after the hurricane of people moving out of the sanctuary. I'd invite those who would like to continue a conversation, talk back with any questions you have and other further topics that we want to share with you, and hope you'll do that. I will make myself heard, as you know I can, when we will begin. Judith, welcome.
Good morning. I have to say, I don't believe in coincidences at all. And I want to just tell you that when Jessica and I first drove up, Jessica had a caterpillar on her. And I was like, oh, well, we need to put the caterpillar, near some leaves so it will survive, right? And we turn and there's a butterfly garden there. And I was like, how perfect is this? And then I turn around and I see the Rosa Parks bench, and I'm thinking, this is a welcoming place. I am a woman of social justice. This is a place of social justice. And so again, I don't think there are any coincidences. I think we are meant to be here. And I really appreciate the invitation from the pastor as well as from Carl, who has helped so much in terms of bringing Sphere to this church today. So thank you all for the invitation. Really appreciate it. As was mentioned in my bio, I am the co-chair, one of 3 co-chairs for the St. Petersburg Higher Education for Racial Equity Consortium. We are known as Sphere, and we have been in existence for 2.5 years only. So we could go to the next slide. There are 4 schools that are involved in this consortium. Stetson University College of Law is one of 4. We also are in collaboration with the University of Southern Florida, USF, Eckerd College, and St. Pete College. And for the last 2.5 years, there have been 25 staff and faculty members who have been volunteering their time in order to put this program together. And it is really one of the most incredible experiences that I have had in terms of organizing, and I've been organizing for several decades. And so to see this group of dedicated individuals within academia saying, yes, we believe that racial equity and racial justice has to be at the forefront of what we're doing, and to put their money where their mouth is, like to actually walk the talk, has been a very inspiring experience for me. We started our consortium in May 2020, shortly after George Floyd was killed. As you may remember, the video of the murder of George Floyd went viral. And it went viral not just nationally, but internationally. And as a result of that international focus, we then began to see a lot of laws being promulgated that would prevent protesting, that would prevent the discussion of race in general, that would prevent people from voting. And I put those 3 things together so that you can think about what that actually means. This is not just an attack related to racial justice. This is an attack related to our democracy. And we need to approach it as such. And that is the perspective that we have at Sphere, right? This is really about how do we continue to move in the direction of social justice and racial equity. How do we continue to do our work and make progress despite what's going on around us? And so the Sphere Consortium has a couple of goals. We seek to dismantle existing racial hierarchies, which means that we plan to address the mythology of white supremacy directly. We also want to inspire a narrative change that will look at race as a non-hierarchical issue, that will look at society as a non-hierarchical society that values all. And we wish to highlight our shared humanity and move towards racial healing and transformation. These are words that come directly from our mission statement. We are part of a network, a national network called the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Network, which is a group of colleges and universities that have been focused on racial healing. But our philosophy is that we can't get to racial healing until we tell the truth about our history, right? There is no way to heal from something that you are not acknowledging. And so part of our work is, again, to change that narrative, to make sure that we are focused on our history, telling the truth about our history, educating our students and community members to really place history at the center of what we're doing so that we can move forward, get to racial healing, and eventually transform into a non-hierarchical society, right? That is our big vision. We have 3 programs at Sphere. One is our Racial Justice Fellowship and Internship Program, which Jessica, who's going to take the podium soon, is a member of and will be speaking to you about her experiences. We also do a National Day of Racial Healing, which is part of the overall network of the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Centers. This day takes place immediately after the Martin Luther King holiday celebration, and it's meant to bring not just the campuses together, but to bring our community together to really talk about how do we actually move forward to achieve racial equity. The third thing that we focus on are racial healing conversations. We have been involved with training our faculty and staff members, as well as some of our students, to be able to facilitate multicultural conversations related to racial healing. We just started doing that. We did our first training with about 15 people a couple weeks ago, and our goal is to continue that as a regular part of our programming. Our Racial Justice Fellowship is really the center of everything that we do. Our goal is to raise up young people to be very vocal and to advocate around racial justice and social justice issues, and to do so without fear, right? And really, I shouldn't say without fear, because we all are fearful at some time. And we're living in a pretty crazy time where fear is one of the predominant emotions that are around us. So I should say that we want to raise courageous students who can move forward even in the face of fear. That is really our goal. So I wanted to also just give you a visual of what our group looks like. This is really maybe about 70% of us. We had just had some very difficult conversations about what was happening politically in Florida, but as you can see, we place joy at the center of our connection as well. So we'll have the serious conversations, but we also really place joy at the center of what we're doing always, right? We know that this work is hard, but we want to make it as simple as possible for our students and for ourselves. So we have placed building community at the center of our agenda. And then this last photo really shows you that we have some students, and these are undergrad students. Some of our students are graduate students in the law school, but some of them are undergrads. These are our undergrad racial justice fellows working on a community forum related to race and policing that they organize themselves. And so we are starting like the 19 and 20-year-olds out with really taking responsibility for carrying the message forward for us, and we hope to continue to develop their leadership. We have several community partners as well, and I'm hoping that this church will become one of our partners as well. But this is a list of our current partners who host our students in summer internships that are focused on racial justice. So the students come to 6 different meetings each semester where they are given education on leadership development as well as racial justice in St. Petersburg. And they are connected to organizations focused on racial justice, which include the NAACP, the Black Health Equity Alliance, the WELL, Community of Tampa Bay, the Youth Farm of St. Petersburg, and also the City of St. Petersburg hosted several of our students while they were sorting out their strategic plan related to systemic racism. Right? They're still in the process of doing that, but we have a connection with them where our students can actually see law at work and racial justice at work as well. So that's my introduction to Sphere. Thank you once again for inviting us, and I am now going to turn over the podium to our Racial Justice Fellow, Jessica King. Thank you.
Good morning. I can't wipe the smile off my face this morning. I'm so excited, and also I've never felt so welcome within a church community before, so thank you for giving me that gift today. So, a little bit about what I'm going to be speaking about today is the first half is an op-ed, an opinion editorial I wrote in undergraduate that I got published in my school's newspaper after going to a open discussion with the topic being what is injustice, or when to speak up against injustice. And that conversation happened in 2020, before COVID, before George Floyd's killing, and that is where this piece was set. The second piece is a article that I wrote recently after kind of going back and reflecting and everything that I've experienced and seen and what is going on in Florida right now. So, okay. When to Speak Up Against Injustice by Jessica King, published April 15th, 2021. When do we speak up against injustice? This was the topic of a CNU Brown Bag event, a small discussion group I attended pre-pandemic, which was open to all students. Their main mission to allow a safe space for students, professors, and alumni to speak openly about issues concerning the CNU community. The event began in a formal fashion with the question, what is injustice, posed to us, much like any normal day in class. The conversation quickly shifted to campus life and the student experience. Slowly and hesitantly, a Black student began to recount the experience of feeling left out of the community due to the color of her skin. Another student began by expressing her confusion and hurt about how the CNU community spoke about the surrounding communities, often warning us not to go down the numbered streets, areas that happen to be primarily Black. Another student chimed in who spoke about how the friends she had started college with had left CNU due to feeling out of place, unwelcome, and in some cases discriminated against because of their race. Many people in the room shifted in their seats, some nodded their heads, and others stared down at the floor. There was an atmosphere of discomfort, pain, ignorance, and defeat all in one. A professor spoke up and said something that I always felt but could never quite place, and that was there was a fear to speak about race in our community. One of the professors nodded and chimed in. One said, "We see this going on. Students come to us with incidents, but we want to speak up for them, but if you don't have tenure, we might lose our job." I gazed at the seriousness of their statement, and suddenly Professor seemed more human than before. Then they said something that would stick with me and howl through my mind daily. Many of you don't know it, but students have much more power than we professors do. The people that teach us all we know, assign our grades, and practically determine our future have less power than we do. I felt confused at this statement and began to feel like Katniss Everdeen in the Hunger Games. Like, who holds the true power? I suddenly realized my shock is a product of my white privilege, and that is the same white privilege held by a majority of CNU students that allowed this cycle to continue without a great deal of notice. The discussion became more emotional and heated as time went on, people at the edge of their seats just trying to get a word in. And suddenly, that was it. Our hour was up, and people grabbed their bags and rushed out of the room. I found myself stuck to my seat, my face red with emotion. That's it. I questioned myself. I'm just supposed to go back to my dorm, eat my lunch, do my homework, and sleep? I had 1,000 questions. I felt confused and disgusted at everything, including my own ignorance and lack of consideration for my fellow Black students and their experiences at my predominantly white institution. I wasn't ready to pretend like what I heard was acceptable on any level. A small group of students after the talk recounted stories of blatant racial discrimination, both towards themselves and others they knew, both within classrooms and on campus, as if it was a well-worn fact of life. Since that day, I see things differently here. How can I feel the same about my university when I'm aware that many fellow peers are experiencing extreme emotional distress and often even drop out or transfer due to feeling unwelcome in our community because of the color of their skin? How can I feel right knowing our professors are scared to speak up against known discrimination? How can I do nothing when I wield the most power? I'm told I wield the most power. When do we speak up against injustice? The answer is when you know something is wrong. The other day, I walked past that room where we felt safe to speak the truth, and I wondered, why isn't our campus a safe space to express our truths? Why don't we make the university a legitimate and campus-wide safe place to speak our minds on hard issues? Why do we facilitate silence? Silence not only in the literal sense, but also in the silence of the voices of the many Black students who are no longer here because they did not feel comfortable enough to stay, grow, and learn as students. This is not their fault. It's the failure on the part of our student community and the university. The university, in good faith, cannot in good faith profess to value inclusivity and diversity unless we make great strides to end discrimination when we see it and feel it, and students and faculty feel safe to discuss it. Some may argue that all predominantly white institutions have these issues, but if we're truly the game-changing school we say we are, one that values leadership, then why can't we be the leaders on this? We can't truly profess to value inclusivity and diversity until everybody feels legitimately, equally seen and heard. It is not a matter of if the university is doing it intentionally or not. The impact does matter, however, because these things are happening now, and it is our responsibility to educate ourselves and to use our own privilege by having these hard conversations. The way to change this culture of silence is with one voice speaking up, and it's our responsibility to change this culture of fear. We have the power to do this. Until then, the silence is broken, there is no justice at this university. That is the first piece, and I call this part When to Speak Up Against Injustice, Part 2. Written February 18th, 2023. I wrote these words before the Stop Woke Act in Florida was passed. I lived in a blue state when I wrote this. The silence I speak about in this article was due to fear and reprimand by the university for speaking on topics related to race. We stand here today in a state that has outlawed this kind of conversation in schools and in the workplace. In schools, we stand here today in a state that has outlawed this kind of conversation in schools and in the workplace. In schools, the place where we're supposed to learn, not white history, but our history, American history, which happens to be full of terrible, horrific atrocities against Black people and other minority groups. It is a history that has been recorded, photographed, written about, and is undeniably fact. We're living in a time where the Florida government, as well as many other state governments, are outlawing the truth. You can be sued now for teaching or speaking about the truth. The Stop Woke Act aims to prevent discomfort in the classrooms, but our history is inherently uncomfortable. It is painful. It is full of suffering and unfair treatment to people that were not and are not upper class, cisgendered, heterosexual, able-bodied white men. It's not a pretty history, but the legislature prohibiting us from teaching that history is not only actively harming us as a whole, but it's one of the greatest censorships of our time. In a time of racial and social unrest, it's more important than ever to learn the truth of our history so we can address it, we can speak openly and freely about it, and we can process and heal from our racial wounds together. To deny this history is to continue the wrongs against non-white people, to ignore how these systems still perpetuate and oppress Black people and other minority groups today, and to inevitably repeat horrific acts of race-based violence. We do not progress by not speaking about things. We progress when we process our nation's traumas together. We acknowledge the wrongs that have happened, and we grow stronger from the fact that we know about these issues so we can vow to do better. The Stop Woke Act threatens our democracy, censoring subjects of history, sociology, psychology, political science, science, political science, health, and so on will undoubtedly harm us all for centuries to come. So the answer is, when do we speak up against injustice? The answer is the same today as it was in 2020, and that's when you know something is wrong. Stop Woke Act stands for Stopping Harms Against Our Kids and Employees. I ask, whose kids and what employees? DeSantis and many of the Florida legislators don't care about preventing harm of people in general. They care about staying in positions of power, privilege, and control. And you know the best way to keep power, privilege, and control? It's to silence people. So what can you do as a progressive and woke church congregation? First, I applaud you, and I very much respect you. I think personally you're doing God's work because the nature of Jesus and his teachings are rooted in kindness and treating everyone as if they were kings, no matter how rich, poor, sick, no matter the color of their skin. So what do we do in the face of probably one of the greatest injustices of our time? We do exactly what the Stop Woke Act is trying to prevent. We love each other. We educate. We have the hard conversations. In any and every area of our lives, we find our local nonprofit, our local NAACP chapter. We give money, we give time to nonprofits that are making changes and pushing back against the censorship that the Stop Woke Act is forcing upon the state. It is vital that you speak up, because the legal battle is a long one and the political battle seems never ending. You have the power to right these wrongs when you see them, hear them, or feel them. I encourage you to educate on Black history, donate books that teach on history that represents Black and Brown experiences. Speak with your families about these issues and volunteer your time. Get involved and get inspired because it's a long battle and it's threatening more than anyone can know. But people who understand that diversity and inclusion and equity are not threats to white people, but actually make society a better place as a whole, need to speak up and live it. Because when we all treat each other like humans, we're all humans, beautiful things happen. I ask, what has ever gone right by hating or silencing or censoring? I think hate is a poison and love is the potion that cures. And by having an open heart, by having these conversations, and by mentoring a student or a person that happens to have a different skin color than you, that's sharing love, and I urge you to do that because our government is not going to do that for us. You have the power, we have the power to do the hard things. And until that silence is broken, there's no justice in this state, this country, or this world. Thank you.
As you can tell, our future is in good hands, yes? I love the Sphere program because I get to interact with amazing students similar to Jessica. We have 15 racial justice fellows who are working with us, and again, we're only 2 years old. We have been in some way derailed in terms of making progress because the Stop Woke Act has some very practical implications, right? I started out saying there were 4 schools that have joined together to create this consortium to help build leadership like Jessica's. And 2 of those schools are state-sponsored schools, USF and St. Pete College. And USF was our financial hub in the last year and a half or so. But since the Stop Woke Act has been instituted, they have had to literally basically scrub their entire university of any types of activities related to racial justice, racial equity, gender equity, and a wide variety of other topics as well. And so the funding that was available for us to run our Racial Justice Fellowship Program to help connect our students to the community is threatened. We don't have access to those funds anymore. But here's the good news. The good news is that we have a phenomenal group of volunteer staff and faculty who are dedicated at the private institutions to continue forward, and we're going to figure out how we can also encompass the volunteer work of our state-sponsored colleagues as well. We want to continue to embrace all 4 institutions in our work, regardless of what the governor has told the state institutions they can or cannot do, right? And Jessica was talking about what do we do in the face of injustice. We continue forward on our own agenda in terms of justice and equity. That's what we do. And that's what Sphere plans on doing as well. And we hope, as I said, to build our community because we recognize we cannot rely upon the state institutions. We have to rely upon the private institutions in terms of academia, but we also really need support from the community as well. And so if you are thinking, like, how can we help in the face of the racial injustices that are being perpetrated by the Stop Woke Act, I want to encourage you to help support students like Jessica and to also support racial healing conversations in your own congregation. I saw that you have your banned books area here, which is great. And you're educating yourselves, which is, I think, the first step. But I think all of us are going to have to carry a little bit more weight right now in terms of moving forward. And so thinking about how can you spread those books out through the community to the kids who won't have access to them anymore, right? That's a really important point. There is a group called the African American Policy Forum that has taken on this aspect of making sure that books are distributed. Let's get all the banned books, let's put them in a bus, let's drive them across the country, which is literally what they're doing. Let's stop. Let's stop in those states that have started banning books and prohibiting conversations about race. Let's stop in those states. Let's give classes from our bus and hand out as many books as possible. So that's what one group is doing. There's another example of a church, actually the Allendale Church in St. Petersburg has just announced in response to DeSantis's banning of the African American AP course that they are going to hold the AP course at their church. It's going to be online. It's going to be online and anyone can sign up for it. So students who need it for credit can still do it, but people in the community, students of life, right, can also access this information. And then finally, one other example of what can be done. There is a group of young activists, brown and black activists called the Dream Defenders. I don't know if you all remember in 2012 when Trayvon Martin was killed by George Zimmerman. There was a group of young students at that time. They were college students. They're now all in their 30s, I guess. But they were college students at the time, and they took over the state legislature for a month. They refused to leave. And it was that group that actually launched the Black Lives Matter movement as well, right? And so that group, the Dream Defenders, does a program called Books and Breakfast, and they've been doing it for many years, and it's all focused on making sure that young people have access to books that have information about a multicultural history, a true history of the American landscape, and that also have pictures of people who look like them in it, right? They've been doing that for quite some time, and we need to continue in that pathway. The only way that we can fight the type of cultural war that has been waged against us in terms of racial justice is to counter the narrative that they are presenting and present our own. And so we have to pick up the pace, we have to do a little bit more than we normally would, and we have to come together in making that happen. So thank you very much for giving us an opportunity to talk to you about our work and to showcase Jessica's perspective on racial justice and what we need to do in the face of injustice. It has been a pleasure being here today. Thank you very much.
Wow. We got some work to do. That was really powerful. I mean, thank you. Professor Scully and Jessica, wow. Is there any way you'd be willing to share any of that out that you wrote, that people that maybe want to dig into a little bit deeper, they could maybe email it here, we can get them a copy or something like that, or can they find it somewhere online somewhere? Or if there's even a link online, just let us know and we'll share that out in our newsletter and get it out to everybody. So, because everybody needs to hear that. So something you said we progress when we process our trauma together. That's a really profound line. I mean, and that's what really is at risk right now. We're not being allowed to process our trauma together because we're just supposed to hide it and hope it goes away in the name of power that's just out of control right now. And it's that line just really grabbed me, and you made me think about churches. You know, that the Stop Woke Act will have a feeding frenzy on the silence of churches. They're afraid to speak out. When churches don't speak out because they're too afraid, they don't want to get political, they don't want to criticize, stay in your lane kind of stuff. Jesus didn't stay in his lane. Never stayed in his lane. He was veering all over the place, He didn't stay in his lane. He would never hear that. Where there was injustice, there he was. And it's just, you're just reminding me of, Martin Luther King Jr. We won't remember the words of our enemies. We're going to remember the silence of our friends. And it's the white churches that are just too afraid to rock the boat. Stop Woke Act loves those churches, loves them, because they're just going to allow it all just to kind of keep on going. So much power in the churches if we can band together and do what you're asking us to do and really make a stand when to speak up against injustice. Well, when you see it, when you see it. So I thank you for your words and for the inspiration that you brought to all of us on this day. It was really a great day. So Professor Scully, Jessica, thank you, thank you, thank you. And now...